The crystal champagne flute shattered in my grip, sending shards across the marble floor of our family's grand foyer. Blood trickled down my palm, but I barely noticed the pain. My parents' voices drifted from Father's study, their words piercing me deeper than any broken glass could. The merger with Graham Industries depends on this marriage, Whitney. Trinity will do as she's told, just as she always has. I'm Trinity, and at 25 years old, I was still nothing more than a bargaining chip in my parents' endless game of social chess. Xander, darling, of course she will. My mother's voice dripped with honey. We've raised her to understand her responsibilities. The wedding will proceed as planned. My hand trembled as I pressed a silk napkin against the cut. The wedding they spoke of, my wedding, was news to me. But then again, most decisions about my life were made without my input. Trinity! Mother's sharp call made me jump. What's that awful noise? Come here at once! I quickly kicked the broken glass under a nearby console table and hurried to the study, hiding my bleeding hand behind my back. The heavy double doors opened to reveal my parents in their natural habitat. Father behind his mahogany desk, Mother perched on the leather chaise lounge like a bird of prey. There you are, darling, Mother said, her perfectly painted lips curving into a practiced smile. We have wonderful news. Father didn't even look up from his laptop. You'll be having dinner with Otis Graham tomorrow evening. Wear something appropriate. Otis Graham? My voice came out smaller than I intended. The CEO of Graham Industries. His son, dear, Mother corrected, rising to adjust my collar. He's only 28, quite handsome and very eligible. The perfect match. I stepped back from her touch. Match for what exactly? Don't be obtuse, Trinity, Father snapped, finally meeting my eyes. This merger could double our market share. The Grahams are old money, just like us. It's a natural alliance. Through marriage? I said flatly. My marriage. Mother waved her hand dismissively. Oh, don't be dramatic. This is how things are done in our circle. I met your father through a similar arrangement, and look how well that turned out. I glanced between them, my father, who treated his family like employees, and my mother, who turned manipulation into an art form. Yes, look how well indeed. And if I refuse? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Father's fingers stopped typing. Refuse? Mother laughed, but her eyes were steel. Why would you refuse? This is the opportunity of a lifetime. The Grahams have 3 houses, a yacht, and connections throughout Europe. Otis is quite taken with your photos. My photos? Heat rushed to my face. You've been showing my pictures to strangers? Business associates, Father corrected. And yes, Otis was particularly impressed with your charity gala photographs. He appreciates a woman who understands social obligations. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably River, my best friend, and the only person who saw me as more than a corporate asset. I longed to answer it, to escape this suffocating room. I have plans tomorrow evening, I said quietly. Cancel them. Father's tone left no room for argument. The restaurant is already booked. 7 p.m. sharp at LeBlanc. Don't disappoint us, Trinity. I turned to leave, but Mother caught my arm. What happened to your hand, dear? Blood had seeped through the napkin, leaving crimson spots on the white silk. I broke a glass. Well, clean yourself up, she sighed, and do something about those dark circles under your eyes. We can't have you looking tired when you meet Otis. I fled the study, but not before hearing my father's final words to my mother. Call the wedding planner. I want everything arranged by next month. The fiscal quarter ends soon, and we need this merger locked down. In my room, I finally checked my phone. River had sent 3 messages. Hey, you okay? Trinity. Call me ASAP. I have an idea. I sank onto my bed, tears threatening to spill, my whole life reduced to a business transaction, a merger, a deal to be closed. Through blurry eyes, I typed back, I need help. They're trying to marry me off to a stranger. River's response was immediate. Pack a bag. Don't let them see you cry. I'm coming to get you tonight. I looked around my luxurious prison, at all the pretty things that had never quite made up for the lack of real love. My hand throbbed, but my heart beat faster with something new. Hope. Or maybe it was fear. Either way, I knew tomorrow's dinner would never happen. I had other plans that would shatter more than just a champagne flute. The security cameras went dark at exactly 2 a.m. River had promised to handle it, though I never asked how. I crept down the servants' staircase, my heart thundering so loudly I feared it would wake the entire house. One backpack, that's all I allowed myself. Some clothes, essential documents, and the emergency cash I'd been secretly stashing for months. Going somewhere, miss. I froze. Martha, our housekeeper, stood at the bottom of the stairs. In her 30 years of service, she'd been more of a mother to me than Whitney ever was. Martha, The words stuck in my throat. She pressed a small envelope into my hands. Your mother's been planning your wedding all evening. The cake tasting is scheduled for next week. She paused, then pulled me into a tight hug. Be safe, Trinity. Be free. Tears pricked my eyes as I hugged her back. Thank you, I whispered. I never saw you, she said, disappearing into the darkness of the kitchen. My phone vibrated. Cars waiting at the gate. I slipped through the garden, staying in the shadows of the carefully manicured hedges. The iron gates loomed ahead, their security keypads blinking red instead of green. River had done her job well. A black sedan idled just beyond the gate, its engine a soft purr in the night. I squeezed through the gap we'd discovered years ago, a design flaw in the fence that my parents never knew about. Get in, River hissed from the driver's seat. I dove into the passenger side, my hands shaking so badly I could barely close the door. River pulled away smoothly, no squealing tires or dramatic acceleration, just a quiet disappearance into the night. Did anyone see you? She asked, keeping her eyes on the road. Just Martha. She won't tell. Good. River handed me a burner phone. Your regular phone? I pulled it from my pocket and rolled down the window. The expensive device sailed into a drainage ditch. Gone. Smart girl. There's a new ID and bank cards in the glove compartment. Reagan came through. Reagan, I asked, pulling out the envelope. Who's that? Someone who helps people like you. She's expecting us in Seattle. I stared at the driver's license in my hands. Same photo, different name. How did you arrange all this? River's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Let's just say I know what it's like to need an escape route. Reagan helped me once, too. The city lights faded behind us as we hit the highway. I kept expecting police sirens, my father's security team, something. But there was only the hum of tires on asphalt and the soft sound of River humming along to the radio. My phone would be trackable until the battery died, lying in that ditch. By the time they found it, we'd be hundreds of miles away. They'll look for me, I said quietly. Probably. But you're 25, Trinity. Legally, they can't do anything. I opened Martha's envelope. Inside was a letter and a small key. Dear Trinity, it read, this key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Seattle, account number 2247. What's inside might help you start your new life. I've been saving for you since you were a little girl who cried about being forced into pageants. Your parents never knew. Be brave, dear one. Martha. Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. River reached over and squeezed my hand. You okay? No, I admitted, but I will be. The sun was rising when River's phone chimed. She glanced at it and smiled. Reagan says your room is ready. We'll be there by tonight. What's she like? Tough. Fair. She runs a legitimate business consulting firm, but she has a soft spot for people running from toxic families. She'll help you find work, build a new life. I leaned back in my seat, watching the morning light paint the sky in shades of hope. My parents would be waking up soon. Mother would be furious when she discovered my empty bed. Father would be more concerned about the merger falling apart. River? Yeah? Thank you for everything. She smiled, her eyes still on the road ahead. That's what real family does. My phone would be discovered soon. The police might be called. But I wasn't a missing person. I was a woman choosing her own path for the first time in her life. I pulled out the new driver's license again. Trinity was gone. According to this, I was now Emma Parker, age 25, from Portland, Oregon. Emma, I whispered, trying the name on for size. It felt like freedom. River turned up the radio as we crossed the state line. Welcome to your new life, Emma. Behind us, the sun rose fully, burning away the last shadows of my old life. Ahead lay Seattle, Reagan, and a future that was finally, completely my own. Seattle greeted me with rain and the smell of coffee. After 3 weeks, I was starting to understand why River had chosen this city for my fresh start. The constant drizzle felt like it was washing away my old life, one drop at a time. You're holding the espresso machine wrong again, Reagan called from behind the counter of her cafe. Tamp the grounds firmly, but don't crush them. I readjusted my grip, trying to mirror her movements. The cafe was my cover job, the perfect place to learn how to blend in with regular people while I got my feet under me. The basement of the building housed Reagan's real business, helping people disappear and rebuild. Better, she nodded as I successfully pulled a shot. You're learning fast, Emma. The name still felt strange, but I was getting used to it, just like I was getting used to wearing jeans instead of designer dresses and having coffee stains on my apron instead of perfect manicures. The bell above the door chimed. Morning, boss, River walked in, shaking rain from her umbrella. She'd moved to Seattle 2 weeks after me, claiming a job transfer, but I knew she'd done it to keep an eye on me. Your usual? I asked, already reaching for the oat milk she preferred. Actually, we need to talk. Her serious tone made me pause. Privately. Reagan nodded toward the back office. Take 5, Emma. I'll cover the front. River closed the office door behind us and pulled out her tablet. Your parents made the news. My stomach dropped as she showed me the headline. Cooper Industries announces surprise merger delay. Stocks plummet. They're looking for you, River continued. Private investigators, social media campaigns, the works, they're spinning it as a mental health crisis, claiming you're unstable and need help. I laughed bitterly. Of course they are. Can't admit their perfect daughter just didn't want to be their puppet anymore. There's more. River swiped to another article. The Grahams are threatening to pull out completely. Your father's company is taking a hit. Good, I said, but my voice shook slightly. Despite everything, seeing my father's empire crumble didn't feel as satisfying as I'd imagined. A knock at the door made us both jump. Reagan entered, carrying 3 coffee mugs. Thought you might need these. Also, Martha called. Is she okay? I asked quickly. They didn't fire her, did they? She's fine. Smart woman, convinced your parents she had no idea about your plans. But she says they're getting desperate. Your mother's been drinking more than usual. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, remembering all the times I'd found Mother with her special tea that smelled like vodka. What do they expect me to do? Just come running back? Actually, Reagan sat on the edge of her desk. This might be an opportunity. Martha accessed some files in your father's study. Apparently, the Graham merger isn't just about business. There are some questionable transactions that would be buried in the merger paperwork. Illegal transactions? I asked. Let's just say the SEC would be very interested. Reagan's eyes met mine. Your father's desperate because he needs this merger to cover his tracks. The implications hit me like a wave. All those years of being the perfect daughter, and my father had been breaking the law behind his mahogany desk. I got something else, River added, pulling an envelope from her bag. Remember that safety deposit box Martha told you about? I nodded. I'd been too scared to visit the bank yet, afraid it might somehow lead my parents to me. I had my contact at the bank check it out. It's not just savings, Trinity, it's documentation, years of it. Martha kept records of everything she saw or heard in that house. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside were copies of some of Martha's records. Dates, transactions, overhead conversations, all meticulously noted. Martha wasn't just a housekeeper, Reagan said softly. She was building you a safety net. And maybe now, some leverage. A notification popped up on River's tablet, an email from my mother's lawyer demanding information about my whereabouts. They're not going to stop, I said, standing up, but maybe it's time they learned what it feels like to be powerless. Reagan smiled, but her eyes were serious. Revenge is a dangerous game, Emma. Are you sure you want to play it? I thought about all the years of control, of being paraded around like a prize horse, of having my entire life planned without my consent. I don't want revenge, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. I want justice, and now I have the power to get it. The cafe's morning rush bell rang, calling me back to work, back to my new life of simple pleasures and honest work. But now I had something else too, a way to ensure my parents could never force anyone else to live the life they'd planned for me. Time to get back to work, I said, straightening my apron. Those espresso shots won't pull themselves. But this time, as I returned to the counter, I was smiling. The game had changed, and for once I held all the cards. Happy 6-month freedom anniversary! River placed a cupcake with a single candle in front of me. The tiny flame flickered in the dim light of my small apartment, casting dancing shadows on the walls. You're ridiculous, I laughed, but my heart swelled. These small celebrations meant more than all the elaborate parties my mother had ever thrown. Reagan raised her wine glass. To Emma Parker, my best barista and most successful renovation project. I'm not your project, I protested, but clinked glasses with her anyway. The cheap wine tasted better than any champagne I'd sipped in my father's study. My phone buzzed. A news alert. River reached for it first, her smile fading as she read the screen. What is it? I asked. Cooper Industries stock dropped another 15% today, she read. CEO Xander Cooper announces temporary step back from daily operations due to health concerns. Health concerns? Reagan scoffed. More like stress from trying to cover his tracks. The SEC is sniffing around just like we predicted. I took the phone, staring at my father's photo. He looked older, greyer. The confident smirk I remembered was replaced by tight, worried lines around his mouth. Your mother's been calling Martha daily, River added gently, asking if she's heard anything. Have they figured out you helped me? I asked, suddenly worried. River shook her head. No. I covered my tracks well. Besides, they're too focused on damage control to look closely at anyone else. The cupcake sat untouched, its candle now just a pool of wax. 6 months of freedom, of learning who I was without my parents' constant control. I had a job, an apartment, real friends. But I also had Martha's documents, burning a hole in my dresser drawer. I saw Otis Graham on TV yesterday, Reagan said, refilling our glasses. He's engaged to some socialite from New York. Guess he moved on pretty quick. Good for him, I muttered. At least he had a choice. A knock at the door made us all freeze. No one knew my address except the people in this room. River moved to the window while Reagan positioned herself between me and the door. Who is it? I called, trying to keep my voice steady. Delivery for Emma Parker. I looked at Reagan, who nodded. When I opened the door, a courier handed me a thick manila envelope and left without a word. It's from Martha, I said, recognizing her handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a letter. Dear Trinity, I read aloud. Your father's been asking questions about the missing files from 2019. He doesn't know I have copies, but he's desperate enough now that he's starting to make mistakes. Yesterday, I overheard him talking about offshore accounts. Be careful. Love, Martha. River plugged the USB into her laptop. Holy shit, she whispered as documents filled the screen. These aren't just questionable transactions. This is full-blown fraud. Look at the dates, Reagan pointed. All leading up to when they tried to force you into that marriage. The Graham merger wasn't just about social climbing. They needed it to hide all of this. My hands shook as I scrolled through years of illegal activities. All those charity galas, all those society parties, funded by fraud and corruption. What do I do with this? I asked. That depends, Reagan said carefully. Do you want to destroy them? Or do you want to make them face consequences? They're already facing consequences, River argued. Look at them. Their perfect world is crumbling without Trinity to prop up their plans. I thought about Martha, still working in that house, watching my parents unravel, about all the other daughters they might try to use if they recovered from this setback. I want them to face real justice, I said finally. Not just social embarrassment or financial setbacks. They need to answer for what they've done. Reagan nodded slowly. I know someone at the SEC. We can arrange an anonymous tip, provide the documentation. But once we do this, there's no going back. Are you ready for that? The candle on my cupcake had completely melted, leaving a small dark pool. Like the darkness I'd escaped 6 months ago. But I wasn't that scared girl anymore. Do it, I said. But first, I need to warn Martha. Get her out before everything explodes. River squeezed my hand. We'll help. That's what real family does, remember? I looked around at my tiny apartment, at my true friends, at the life I'd built from scratch. My parents had taught me that power came from money and control, but real power, I'd learned, came from choosing your own path and standing up for what's right. To justice, I said, raising my glass, and to family, the kind we choose. The night stretched ahead, full of plans and possibilities. Tomorrow the real work would begin. But tonight, surrounded by love and truth, I was finally, completely free. The morning news hit like a thunderbolt. I was pouring coffee at the cafe when every phone in the place buzzed simultaneously with the alert. Cooper Industries was under federal investigation. Emma, Reagan appeared at my elbow. Take a break. Now. In the back office, River was already waiting, her laptop open to a live news feed. My father stood at a podium, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. Mother stood beside him, her face a frozen mask of dignity, but I could see the slight tremor in her champagne-manicured hands. The allegations against Cooper Industries are completely unfounded, Father was saying. We will cooperate fully with the investigation and expect to be fully cleared of any wrongdoing. Turn it up, I whispered as a reporter stood. Mr. Cooper, sources say this investigation was triggered by an anonymous whistleblower with extensive documentation. Do you have any comment on the identity of this person? My father's face tightened. We have reason to believe this is a coordinated attack by our competitors, possibly in connection with my daughter's current situation. Your daughter? Another reporter jumped in. Trinity Cooper has been missing for 6 months. Are you suggesting she's involved? My daughter is unwell. Mother stepped forward, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. We're deeply concerned about her mental state and the people who may be manipulating her. Trinity, if you're watching this, please come home. We can help you. I clicked the laptop shut, my hands shaking. They're trying to discredit me before I even come forward. Standard playbook, Reagan nodded. But we planned for this, remember? River's phone buzzed. Martha's clear. She quit this morning, took everything from her house. She's on her way here. Good. I took a deep breath. Then it's time for phase 2. Reagan pulled out a burner phone. My SEC contact is ready. 1 call and we release everything. The documentation, the offshore accounts, all of it. Wait, River said, pulling up another news site. Look at this. A new headline scrolled across the screen. Graham Industries cuts all ties with Cooper Industries amid fraud investigation. Otis Graham released a statement, River read. We are shocked by these allegations and are fully cooperating with federal authorities. Our planned merger was contingent on complete transparency, which was clearly not provided. I laughed darkly. Shocked? Please. They knew. They just didn't expect to get caught. The office door opened and Martha hurried in, looking smaller without her housekeeper's uniform. Trinity. I hugged her tight, smelling the familiar lavender perfume she'd worn all my life. Thank you for everything, Martha. Are you okay? Better than your parents, she pulled back, her eyes fierce. Your mother threw a crystal vase at the wall when the SEC arrived. Your father's been locked in his study making calls all morning. Did they suspect you? No, they're too busy suspecting each other. Your mother accused your father of ruining their lives with his reckless schemes. He blamed her obsession with social status. Reagan held up the burner phone. It's your call, Emma. Release everything now, or wait. I thought about my mother's performance at the press conference, playing the worried parent, about my father's attempts to paint me as unstable, about years of manipulation and control. Do it, I said. Release it all. Reagan dialed, spoke briefly, then nodded. It's done. Within an hour, every major news outlet will have the full documentation. What about you? River asked softly. Are you ready to go public? I'd thought about this moment for weeks. Not yet. Let them squirm first. Let them wonder who betrayed them. Martha touched my arm. Your mother has been drinking heavily. Your father's heart condition. Don't, I cut her off. They didn't care about my mental health when they tried to force me into marriage. They don't get to play the victim now. My phone buzzed. Another news alert. The story was breaking. Words like systematic fraud and criminal conspiracy flashed across the screen. Cooper Industries stock trading halted, River read. Federal agents seen entering corporate headquarters. Trinity, Martha said quietly, using my real name. Whatever happens next, remember why you did this. Not for revenge, but for justice. I looked around at my chosen family. River with her unwavering loyalty, Reagan with her fierce protection, Martha with her years of quiet resistance. They'd helped me find not just freedom but strength. I remember, I said, straightening my shoulders, and soon, so will they. Outside the office, customers were glued to their phones, watching my old world crumble in real time. But in here, surrounded by truth and love, I was building something stronger than my parents' empire of lies. The next move would be theirs. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what they might do. I was ready for whatever came next. The letter arrived 3 days after the SEC raid. No return address, just my new name written in my mother's perfect penmanship. How she found me, I didn't want to know. You don't have to open it, River said, watching me turn the envelope over in my hands. Yes, I do. I broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of expensive stationery. Trinity, your father had a minor heart attack yesterday. The doctors say stress was a factor. I know you're behind the investigation. Whatever we did to hurt you, surely this is punishment enough. Come home. We can fix this as a family. Mother. Minor heart attack, Reagan scoffed, reading over my shoulder. More like panic attack when he realized he couldn't destroy evidence fast enough. My phone rang. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Trinity? My father's voice, weaker than I remembered. Don't hang up. I put the phone on speaker. River and Reagan moved closer, protective bookends on either side of me. What do you want? My voice stayed steady, surprising me. The SEC is freezing our assets. Your mother's a mess. Is this what you wanted? To destroy everything I built? Everything you built on lies, I corrected. How many other families were you planning to manipulate? How many other daughters were you going to use as bargaining chips? A long pause. You don't understand business. No, you don't understand, Father. I saw the documents, all of them. The fraud, the cover-ups, the planned merger with the Grahams to hide your illegal dealings. Did you really think I'd never find out? Where are you? His voice hardened, more like the father I remembered. We need to discuss this in person. Your mother's lawyer is probably very busy right now, I cut in. How many years do you think you're looking at, Father? Federal fraud charges aren't like your country club violations. I'm still your father, he snapped. Everything I did was to secure your future. My future? I laughed bitterly. You mean securing your future by selling me to the highest bidder? The Grahams would have what? Hidden your crimes in exchange for your daughter? Was that the real merger plan? Another pause. I heard ice cubes clinking in a glass. Even during a crisis, he wouldn't skip his scotch. Come home, he said finally. We can make this go away. The SEC, the investigation, all of it. We're still powerful enough. No. The word came out sharp and clear. You're not powerful anymore. That's why you're calling. You're desperate. Trinity, please. My mother's voice now. She must have been there all along. We're your parents. We love you. Love? My voice cracked. Love doesn't come with conditions. Love doesn't treat people like property. We can change, she pleaded. Whatever you want. Just call off the investigation. Reagan squeezed my shoulder. River nodded encouragingly. You're right about one thing, I said. I am behind the investigation. I have copies of everything, and tomorrow I'm going to the SEC in person to testify. You wouldn't, Father growled. You'd destroy this family? You destroyed this family long ago. I'm just making sure you can't destroy anyone else's. Think about what you're doing, Mother said. Once you do this, there's no going back. I looked at the people around me. My real family. I don't want to go back. I'm going forward. Trinity! I hung up. The phone immediately rang again. And again. And again. Block the number, Reagan advised. You said what needed to be said. They'll try to stop you, River warned. The SEC testimony. Let them try. I stood up, stronger than I'd felt in months. I'm not afraid anymore. Martha appeared in the doorway. I just saw the news. Your father's company stock is being delisted tomorrow. Good. I picked up my mother's letter and tore it in half. They need to learn that actions have consequences. Are you ready for tomorrow? River asked. Once you testify, your name will be public. Everyone will know. I thought about the scared girl who'd fled in the night 6 months ago. She'd been running away, but tomorrow I'd be running toward something, toward justice, toward truth, toward real freedom. I'm ready, I said. It's time everyone knew the truth about Cooper Industries, about all of it. We'll be right there with you, Reagan promised. Outside, rain fell on Seattle's streets, washing everything clean. Tomorrow would bring cameras, questions, and consequences. But tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be. Surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not what I could do for them. The phone rang one last time before I blocked the number. Let them worry tonight. Tomorrow they'd learn what real power looked like. The SEC building loomed before me, all glass and steel. Camera crews clustered near the entrance, waiting. My testimony had been kept quiet, but somehow they knew something big was coming. Ready? River adjusted my blazer collar, a far cry from the designer suits my mother used to choose for me. As I'll ever be. I gripped the document folder tighter. Where's Reagan? Already inside with her contact, Martha's watching from the cafe across the street. River checked her phone. Your parents just arrived, back entrance. My stomach lurched. They're here? Of course they are. Their lawyers probably insisted. River squeezed my hand. But they can't stop you, not anymore. We approached the entrance. Cameras swiveled toward us, but no one recognized me yet. 5 more steps. 4. 3. Trinity! My mother's voice cut through the morning air. She stood at the corner of the building, designer sunglasses hiding what I suspected were hungover eyes. Father wasn't with her. Ms. Parker, an SEC official approached. We're ready for you. Mother pushed forward. Trinity, please. Don't do this to us. To your father. His heart. Ms. Cooper, the official interrupted. This is a federal proceeding. Any attempt to interfere with a witness. Witness? Mother's voice rose. She's my daughter. Reporters perked up, cameras turning. The morning news would have their story now. Not anymore, I said clearly, loud enough for the cameras to catch. You lost the right to call me daughter when you tried to sell me to cover up fraud. Gasps and clicking shutters. Mother's face went white. Inside, the hearing room was smaller than I expected. Father sat with his lawyers looking old and grey. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Please state your name for the record, the lead investigator said. I leaned into the microphone. Trinity Cooper, although I now legally go by Emma Parker. And you have documentation regarding Cooper Industries' financial dealings. I opened my folder. Yes, 8 years of records showing systematic fraud, money laundering, and illegal offshore accounts. Father's lawyer stood. We object to this testimony. Ms. Cooper is clearly acting out of personal vendetta The evidence speaks for itself, I cut in, sliding the first document forward. This shows the initial transfer to the Cayman Islands account, dated the same day my father began negotiations with Graham Industries for my arranged marriage to their heir. More documents followed, years of careful records, thanks to Martha's diligence. Father's face grew paler with each revelation. Mother sat in the back, quietly crying. And this final document, I said, pulling out the contract I'd found in Martha's files, shows that the Graham merger wasn't just about business. It was a carefully orchestrated cover-up, with me as the sacrificial lamb. That's enough, Father stood suddenly. This is ridiculous. She's just a bitter child who… Mr. Cooper, the investigator warned, sit down or you'll be removed. I met my father's eyes. I'm not a child anymore, and I'm not your property. Everything I did, he said hoarsely, was for this family. No, everything you did was for yourself, and now you're going to face the consequences. The hearing lasted 3 more hours. I presented evidence, answered questions, watched my parents' empire crumble one document at a time. When it was over, reporters swarmed the steps outside. River appeared at my side, shielding me from the chaos. Trinity! Mother pushed through the crowd. You've ruined us. Are you happy now? I turned to face her, cameras rolling. I didn't ruin anything. Your choices did that. Your lies, your manipulation. We gave you everything, she hissed. No, you took everything. My choices, my freedom, my trust. But not anymore. Father emerged, surrounded by lawyers. He looked defeated, small. The board is demanding my resignation, he said to no one in particular. Good, I replied. Maybe they'll choose someone who understands that people aren't commodities to be traded. Ms. Cooper, reporters called. What motivated you to come forward? I looked at River, thought of Reagan and Martha waiting across the street. The truth motivated me, and the hope that no other daughter will be used the way I was. Mother reached for me one last time. Please, Trinity, we're still family. No, I said quietly. Family doesn't hurt each other like this. Family protects each other, and I finally found people who understand that. I walked away, River beside me, leaving my parents to face the cameras alone. Their lawyers would work all night, trying to save what they could of the company, of their reputations. But I was done. The truth was out. Justice was in motion. Across the street, Martha and Reagan waited with coffee and proud smiles. My real family, my real home. The cameras followed, but I didn't care anymore. Let them see. Let everyone see what happens when you choose truth over power, love over control. Let them see me, finally free. The autumn rain tapped against Reagan's cafe windows as I wiped down the espresso machine. The news played quietly on the TV above the counter. Another story about Cooper Industries dismantling and sale. Still weird seeing your father in handcuffs? River asked, sliding onto a bar stool. Not as weird as seeing my mother check into rehab, I replied, starting her usual oat milk latte. Martha says she's actually doing the work this time. Speaking of Martha, River nodded toward the door. Martha entered, shaking rain from her umbrella. She looked younger somehow, more relaxed in casual clothes than she ever had in her housekeeper's uniform. The house sold, she announced, settling beside River. Some tech executive bought it. They're turning the grounds into a community garden. I smiled at the irony. My mother's precious manicured lawns transformed into something actually useful for the community. How's the new job? I asked, sliding her a cup of Earl Grey. The women's shelter needs all the help they can get. Turns out I'm good at helping people start over. She gave me a meaningful look. I learned from the best. The bell chimed again. Reagan hurried in, waving a letter. Emma, this just came for you. My new name felt natural now, a choice rather than an escape. I opened the envelope and gasped. What is it? River leaned over. It's from the SEC, I said, scanning the letter. They're using the seized Cooper assets to create a foundation for helping women escape financial abuse and coercive control. And, Reagan prompted, grinning like she already knew. They want me to help run it. Martha clasped her hands together. Oh, Trinity, Emma, that's perfect. Is it? I set the letter down. Part of me still feels guilty. About my father's heart condition, my mother's breakdown. Stop, River said firmly. Their choices led to those consequences. Your choice was to tell the truth. Besides, Reagan added, your mother's doing better in rehab than she ever did drowning her guilt in vodka. Sometimes rock bottom is where people find themselves. The TV caught my attention. Another breaking news alert. My father's face appeared on screen as the anchor spoke. Former CEO Xander Cooper pleaded guilty today to multiple charges of fraud and financial misconduct. In a surprising statement, Cooper expressed remorse not for his financial crimes, but for, quote, sacrificing my daughter's happiness for profit. Cooper faces up to 15 years. I turned down the volume. He actually admitted it. People can surprise you, Martha said softly, even after all these years. The cafe door opened again. A young woman entered, looking nervous and lost, the same way I'd looked that first night in Seattle. Can I help you? I asked. She twisted her engagement ring anxiously. I heard this was a safe place. Someone at the women's shelter gave me this address. Said to ask for Emma. River and Reagan exchanged knowing looks. Martha smiled into her tea. Have a seat, I said, already reaching for a clean mug. Let me guess. Family trying to control your life? She nodded, tears welling up. My father. There's this merger. I'm supposed to marry. I know exactly what you're going through. I placed a hot chocolate in front of her. And I know exactly how to help. As I listened to her story, I thought about choices and consequences, about truth and justice, about how sometimes you have to break something completely before you can build something better. The rain continued outside, but in here it was warm and safe. River typed resources into her phone. Reagan already had her network of contacts ready. Martha offered gentle encouragement born from years of watching and waiting and helping. And me? I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was exactly where I needed to be, helping another daughter find her voice, her strength, her freedom. What's the first step? The young woman asked. I smiled, remembering my own first step into this new life. The first step is choosing yourself. Everything else follows from that. She took a deep breath, slipped off her engagement ring, and placed it on the counter. Then that's what I choose. River squeezed my hand under the counter. Reagan winked. Martha beamed with pride. The TV still played silently above us, showing the end of an empire built on lies. But here, in this cafe, we were building something stronger, a network of truth, of support, of real family. I picked up the SEC letter again, running my fingers over my new name. Emma Parker, advocate and survivor. It wasn't the life my parents had planned for me. It was better. Welcome to your first day of freedom, I told the young woman. Trust me, you're going to love where this journey takes you.
My son and I are soon embarking on an opulent new chapter of our lives overseas, all thanks to his impressive $10 million. Once we're gone and you're divorced, you'll find it hard to fend for yourself. Curious about our destination? Well, you'll have to humble yourself, kneel, and maybe even grovel at my feet before I consider telling you more. What are you talking about? I'm lost. I had absolutely no clue what my mother-in-law was implying. The news of their plans to move abroad and the substantial savings came as a complete surprise to me. It's simple. With my son's $10 million, we're set to start a glamorous life in a foreign land, just the two of us, she continued. But why would my husband leave, and what's with the sudden mention of $10 million? If you're that desperate to know, get on your knees, beg, and maybe I'll enlighten you. Why this hostility? Where is my husband? We're quite content, enjoying the lavish lifestyle that my son's fortune affords, she remarked dismissively. It was clear I was no longer needed. Her words stunned me. What did she mean that my husband had suddenly acquired $10 million and was living a luxurious life abroad? Why was she acting as though I was an outsider? Overwhelmed with anger and confusion, I knew I needed to remain composed and uncover the truth. How did my husband come into such a large sum of money? Could there be more to this $10 million? I manage a prominent IT company where I met my husband. His upbeat and lively nature won me over, and eventually we married. Initially, his parents were very welcoming, and years later, we had a daughter, now 12. Having experienced a tough childhood and strained relationship with my parents, I was resolved to provide my daughter with all the love and support she needed, juggling both my career and home life. However, things took a turn when my husband was assigned to a project in Florida, requiring him to move there alone. Managing everything single-handedly with our daughter was daunting. It's going to be challenging handling work, home, and our daughter alone, I expressed to him. Perhaps it might be wise to ask my mother to help, he suggested, considering the load I would have to bear. He suggested it with some hesitation, but I saw it as a sensible approach to our current predicament. Thus, we decided to invite my mother-in-law to move in with us to offer some assistance. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming back?" my daughter inquired one day. "He's going to be in Florida for a while, but don't worry, Grandma is coming to stay with us," I reassured her. With that, my mother-in-law joined our household. Little did I realize that this decision would soon become one of my greatest regrets. "You're working late again today, huh?" Women who neglect their families. These were the kind of biting remarks I'd often return home to. "I have a job too, and I take care of our daughter," I would retort, though she seemed perpetually unimpressed. When I was young, family was everything. I never even considered working outside the home, she would often reminisce nostalgically. Then, on a day when my daughter received excellent grades, she claimed, "It's all thanks to me. What's the point of you? Maybe we don't need you around." Despite her involvement being limited to simple homework tasks, I was the one teaching my daughter most subjects. Whenever I made even a minor mistake in cooking, she would criticize me. "How did you and my son ever manage before with such poor cooking skills?" "I'm doing my best and everyone has their style," I argued, feeling my patience growing thin. "She's not doing her chores," she would complain to my husband. "Mom, she's working too. Please understand." My husband would defend me during their conversations. However, with my husband away and my mother-in-law at home, tensions escalated, and I felt increasingly isolated. One evening, I decided to call my husband to discuss everything. "Oh, are you okay right now?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm good. What's up? It's kind of late here, but your mom laid into me about the house chores and it's starting to get to me," I confessed. "I'm sorry, Mom's always been sharp-toned, but maybe there's something to what she's saying. Still, don't let it bother you too much. Just keep doing things at your own pace," he advised, trying to provide some reassurance with his words. Despite the support, the daily struggles with my mother-in-law continued to challenge my resolve. Trying to maintain our daily routine became increasingly difficult with my husband away. The constant pressure from my mother-in-law was exhausting, and I found myself counting the days until his return. Initially, memories of happier times with him helped me cope, but as the weeks dragged on, her critical behavior grew unbearable. She nitpicked everything I did from dawn until dusk. One evening, when I prepared my husband's favorite rice dish, she coldly commented, "This tastes terrible. Who would eat this?" If I ever paused for a brief break, she would scold me. How can a woman who can't handle household chores justify taking a break? While my husband would usually shrug off my minor mistakes with a laugh, in front of my mother-in-law, I felt pressured to be flawless. Her harsh treatment, I suspect, stemmed from her deep affection for her son and her reluctance to accept that he had chosen to marry me and live away from her. This challenging situation strengthened my resolve never to become an overbearing parent like her. One day, after indulging in a small shopping spree at a local mall to uplift my spirits, I returned home to find her fuming at the entrance. "How could you go out for fun while your husband isn't home? What about the household chores?" She confronted me furiously. "I thought I needed a little break," I responded, trying to keep my calm in a tense situation. "A break? All this trouble is because of your incompetence," she retorted. After that harsh exchange, I desperately awaited a call from my husband, hoping his voice would comfort me. However, the news he shared was anything but comforting. "I've got some bad news," he began. "My work in Florida isn't going well. I got into gambling. I was in a tough financial spot and had accumulated quite a bit of debt." My husband confessed over the phone. "Are you serious? Gambling in debt? This is completely unexpected. What about our future and our daughter?" I replied, shocked and worried. "I'm sorry, I feel stuck right now, but trust me, I'll figure something out," he pleaded. "How do you plan to handle this? How much do you owe?" I asked, seeking clarity. "I'm working on a solution," was all he could manage. I had always seen my husband as a dependable and sincere man. He never missed our dates, and even after we moved in together, he always came straight home from work, showing appreciation for everything I did around the house. His honesty and sincerity were what made me fall in love with him. However, now, with him far away, and under the constant barrage of my mother-in-law's criticisms, my life felt increasingly unbearable. "I can't believe someone as useless as you married my son," my mother-in-law would often sneer, her harsh words cutting deep. With my husband continuing his work away from home, the sting of his gambling debts, and the relentless criticism from my mother-in-law, my despair grew. One night, feeling utterly overwhelmed, I found myself crying on a park bench, alone. Then, one evening during dinner, my mother-in-law unearthed a secret from my past and used it to taunt me further. "So, I heard you used to work in a nightclub, huh? Shame on you for raising my grandchild after working in such a place. How did you find out about that?" I asked, stunned. "I was telling someone about how useless my son's wife is and showed them a picture of you. They recognized you. Apparently, you weren't even good at that job," she jeered. "Before I married my husband struggling for money, I had indeed worked at a nightclub, a secret I thought he didn't know." I was speechless. I never imagined my mother-in-law would discover this about my past, let alone use it against me. "I can't believe someone like you is the mother of my grandchild," she spat venomously, hinting that I might be kicked out. My despair deepened as everything I had built with my husband, all my efforts and the future I had hoped for, seemed to crumble under her harsh words. Meanwhile, my husband's communication became increasingly scarce, leaving me to face the mounting challenges alone. Feeling increasingly doubtful and suspected by those closest to me, I found myself alone one night, reflecting deeply on my life, the journey of meeting my husband, our marriage, our current turmoil, and the relentless blame and accusations from my mother-in-law. It all felt too overwhelming. "I can't take it anymore," I whispered to myself. Driven by despair, I stepped out into the quiet, starless night, the weight of my mother-in-law's critical words about my past and my current situation echoing in my mind. I found solace on a park bench, gazing up at the sky, which seemed as dark and empty as I felt inside. Out of the quiet, a familiar voice approached. "Mom, why are you here?" It was my daughter who sat beside me and took my hand. "Mom, don't let Grandma get to you. You work hard at your IT job and you've overcome so much. You're strong." "Thank you, but maybe Grandma is right," I sighed. "Mom, Grandma is stuck in the past. In today's world, any job you've done should make you proud. I'm proud that you worked at a nightclub." "Yes, because it shows you've always tried your best for us, no matter the circumstances. Don't let Grandma's words control you," she reassured me, her words deeply touching my heart. Tears welled up in my eyes as she continued. "Mom, you're doing such a great job in IT now, right? That's amazing. I'll always support you no matter what Grandma says." Gratitude flooded my heart. Her unwavering support gave me renewed strength and hope that we could face anything together. Later, back in my husband's study, I took a deep breath before diving into a pile of paperwork. I meticulously went through each document, trying to unravel the mysteries of his finances: bank statements, credit card bills, loan agreements. Gradually, the details of my husband's financial situation began to reveal themselves. Why did this happen? I wondered, discovering several receipts detailing his gambling activities: horse racing, slot machines, and casino visits. The realization of how much money my husband had squandered was heartbreaking. Turning on his PC, I guessed that the reverse version of his birthday was the password to access his email. Inside, I found numerous collection emails from financial institutions and messages from friends demanding repayment of loans. Additionally, his inbox was flooded with promotional emails from gambling websites. I decided to tally the total amount my husband had spent on gambling. The staggering result was $10 million, far exceeding what I had anticipated. Seeing that figure, a moment of panic set in. Realizing the urgency of the situation, I swiftly began to strategize on securing our financial stability. This included tapping into my personal savings, estimating the proceeds from selling our high-end electronics and luxury items, and carefully planning our budget based on my salary. Every little detail was crucial in these critical moments. As I carried on with my investigation, I contacted various financial institutions daily to fully grasp the extent of my husband's debts. I also obtained credit reports in his name. A few days later, I formulated a plan. I began laying the groundwork to establish a life independent of my husband and mother-in-law, while also figuring out a strategy to manage his debts. Using my expertise in the IT industry, I decided to pursue freelance projects. I quickly put together a portfolio and signed up on a freelance job platform. Shortly after, I received my first project request from a client. "This will help cover some of our living expenses," I thought, grateful for the opportunity. While managing my daily work, I meticulously reviewed our household finances. I canceled unnecessary subscriptions, cut back on wasteful spending, and researched budget-friendly recipes to reduce our food expenses. With insights from local moms, I organized a community yard sale, successfully selling branded items and extra electronics for a decent sum. As my freelance work gained momentum over the following weeks, I began to feel more secure about our financial future. By then, my bank account held enough to cover our essential living expenses. When I returned home one day, I noticed all of my mother-in-law's belongings were gone. At the same time, my phone rang. It was her. "Oh, are you already home? Did you notice our stuff is gone?" Her voice came through the phone. "What are you trying to say?" I asked cautiously. "My son and I are starting a luxurious life abroad with his $10 million. Once you divorce, you won't be able to make ends meet. If you want our address, get on your knees and lick my shoes," she declared arrogantly. I couldn't help but chuckle. "That $10 million is a debt." "Stop joking. There's no way my son has that kind of debt," she retorted confidently. "You might not believe it, but it's the truth," I replied, armed with the facts from my investigation. Amid the late-night silence of our home, I sat surrounded by the harsh reality revealed in my husband's study. Bank transactions, credit card statements, and contracts littered the desk, evidence of his gambling debts. His computer screen displayed a relentless collection of emails and desperate messages from friends seeking repayment. Promotional emails from gambling websites peppered his inbox. "If you don't believe me, why not check for yourself?" I told my mother-in-law over the phone despite her protests of disbelief. "You must be mistaken," she insisted. "I'm looking right at it. Gambling debts from horse racing, slot machines, and casinos totaling a staggering $10 million. I've just emailed you the proofs. Take a look when you can," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence followed. Then, a soft admission from her. I didn't know about this. He probably hid it to spare us the worry, but now I see. I've been grappling with how we'll manage this mountain of debt, thinking it was our joint burden to bear, but perhaps that's not the case, I said with a mix of sorrow and resolve. After a pause that seemed to stretch forever, she finally spoke. I'm at a loss for words. I truly didn't know, she murmured. We ended the call shortly after, and each of us left to ponder the revelations. Despite the upheaval caused by my husband and mother-in-law's initially planned escape to a lavish life abroad, a plan based on what turned out to be a misunderstood financial document, I decided to chart a new path forward for my daughter and me. I needed to protect our future, irrespective of the crumbling circumstances around us. Later, my husband reached out, his voice laden with regret. I'm so deeply sorry. I never meant for things to spiral out of control, he confessed. Our family is disintegrating because of your actions. How did you let it get this far? I demanded, my tone sharp with pent-up frustration and hurt. He sighed heavily. I got caught up in dreams of a different life with Mom, ignoring the realities facing us here. I didn't foresee the ruinous impact of my choices. Promises to your mother at the expense of our daughter's future? How could you prioritize anything over her well-being? I pressed, unable to mask the betrayal I felt. After a tense silence, he responded quietly. I thought I was doing what was best at the time. I see now how wrong I was. Do you still care about us? About your family? I asked, a part of me dreading the answer. I always will, but I understand if you can't see past this. Perhaps it's best if you and our daughter move on without me, he admitted, his voice breaking with emotion. As his sobs filled the silence that followed, I hung up the phone, a mix of sadness and determination settling in. It was clear I had to rebuild from the ground up, focusing solely on the well-being of my daughter and myself. The mistake of misreading a bill as a $10 million lottery win had set off this chain of events, but it was up to me to steer our course toward stability and recovery. As my mother-in-law plotted their supposed dream relocation overseas, she convinced my husband to accompany her, both blissfully unaware of her crucial mistake. It was a bill, not a lottery win, that fueled their plans. Believing that starting anew abroad might mitigate their financial troubles, my husband naively agreed to the move. When I discovered the truth behind their intentions and the financial blunder, my frustration and anger toward my husband intensified. Determined to protect myself and my daughter, I started consulting with a lawyer, preparing for divorce, and ensuring we could secure emotional distress compensation and child support. This marked a turning point. A new beginning was unfolding for my daughter and me, free from the disillusionment brought by my husband and his mother. During this transformative period, my daughter and I grew incredibly close. Her unwavering support in my decision to start anew became my pillar of strength. Each affirmation from her filled me with a mix of relief and gratitude, making the emotional turmoil we endured together seem worthwhile. Meanwhile, the reality of life overseas quickly soured for my mother-in-law and husband. Their ill-prepared venture was marred by financial instability and unexpected challenges, including a significant loss of their remaining funds to pickpockets, further complicated by language barriers. Ultimately, their lack of foresight led to deportation due to visa overstay issues. Back home, through careful negotiations led by my attorney, the terms of the divorce were finalized. We decided that my husband would pay a single lump sum for emotional distress compensation and child support. While this brought a formal end to our marriage, my lawyer suggested considering installment payments instead, citing my husband's continued financial irresponsibility and new debts owed to dubious lenders. As my mother-in-law faced dire consequences from their failed adventure, evicted and penniless after being robbed, She returned to the U.S. only to find herself homeless. I, on the other hand, felt a profound sense of peace as my daughter and I embraced our new chapter. Though not without its own set of challenges, being free from the past chaos allowed us to face the future with renewed optimism. Determined to build a joyful, stable life, my daughter stood by my side as a beacon of hope. Together, we navigated our way through the dark times, now looking forward to brighter days with a resilient spirit and hearts full of hope. The dawn of the new year, often heralded as a beacon of new beginnings, instead delivered a jarring shock to my doorstep. Amidst the serene silence of my snug abode, the sudden ring of the doorbell shattered the calm. Expecting perhaps a neighbor or a delivery, I casually swung the door open, only to be confronted with a sight that sent my heart plummeting. My sister Elizabeth and my ex-husband Jack standing there. Elizabeth, with her irritatingly self-satisfied grin, seemed almost triumphant beside Jack. The sight of him was like tearing open a scar long thought healed. He carried an air of unearned remorse, his arrogance thinly veiled. It had been 4 long years since our paths had last crossed, and yet here they were, appearing as if no time had passed, as if no bridges had been burned. "Why are you here?" I managed to utter, my voice quaking with disbelief. Elizabeth's laugh, sharp and mocking, filled the air. "Oh, look at that, Jack. She's speechless. What's the matter, Linda? Not thrilled to see your darling sister and your devoted ex-husband?" Jack, leaning nonchalantly against the doorframe, scanned the room with a feigned interest. "Yeah, Linda, we just thought we'd drop by, wanted to see how you've been managing without us." My hands balled into fists at my sides, the urge to slam the door in their faces overwhelming. "This isn't your place anymore, Jack and Elizabeth. You shouldn't be here either," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. They merely smirked, unaffected by my feeble defiance. Then, Jack delivered a blow that hit like a physical strike. "You know, Linda, I regret every moment spent with you. What a waste of my best years." Elizabeth chimed in, her faux sympathy dripping with venom. "Poor Linda always coming up short, even in marriage." Their cruel words stung, cutting deep. But before I could muster a response, another voice intervened. "Who's there, Linda?" It was my father, Walter, arriving earlier than expected. Elizabeth and Jack's expressions flickered with surprise at his sudden appearance. As their smirks faded and they shifted uneasily on their feet, I breathed a sigh of relief. "Dad, you're home early," I remarked, the tension in my voice lightening a bit. Dad's eyes narrowed as he assessed the scene before him, his gaze sharp and penetrating. "Elizabeth, Jack, what brings you here?" he asked, his voice stern, stripping them of their earlier bravado. There was a moment of heavy silence before Elizabeth attempted an explanation. "We just wanted to wish Linda a happy new year." Dad's skepticism was palpable. "Really? After all this time you suddenly decide to remember family on New Year's?" His tone was icy, betraying his underlying anger and disappointment. Jack, attempting to salvage their facade, chimed in. "We also have some news, but perhaps now isn't the right time." I knew there was more to their visit than empty holiday pleasantries. Their sudden appearance, the smirks, the thinly veiled insults, it was all part of a familiar pattern of deceit and manipulation. However, I wasn't the same person they had left behind. As they made an awkward exit, promising to return another time, I closed the door behind them, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Their presence foretold trouble, and this time I needed to be prepared. Once Elizabeth and Jack were gone, the house returned to an eerie silence. Dad sat across from me, his expression lined with concern. "Linda, what was that about? Why are they back?" he asked. I sighed, the weight of past conflicts pressing down on me. "I'm not sure, Dad, but with Elizabeth and Jack, there's always an ulterior motive." Dad nodded grimly, his memories of their past actions still vivid. I remember how things ended, how they hurt you. You owe them nothing, Linda. His support was comforting, yet there was a layer to the saga he hadn't fully grasped. The depth of Elizabeth's manipulation, a toxicity that dated back to our childhood, a time that should have been carefree but was instead overshadowed by her selfishness. Dad, remember my 10th birthday? The porcelain doll Grandma gave me? I asked, my voice tinged with sadness. His expression softened. Of course you cherished that doll. I nodded. The memory was vivid and painful. Elizabeth broke it on purpose and then blamed it on me. She tearfully told Mom that it was an accident, but that I had caused it. Dad's expression shifted to one of surprise. I never knew that. Your mother and I always thought it was just an accident. I nodded, feeling the sting of those old wounds. That was just the beginning, I confided. Elizabeth always played the innocent one, and somehow I was always the one who got blamed. She knew exactly how to manipulate everyone around her. I could see the dawning of regret in Dad's eyes, a realization of what he had missed all these years. I'm sorry, Linda. I should have seen through her acts, he said, his voice laden with remorse. It's not your fault, Dad, I reassured him, taking a deep breath to steady myself. We were all deceived by Elizabeth. I paused, the memories bitter. Even with Jack, she played us both. They truly deserve each other. Dad reached out, his hand clasping mine in a gesture of comfort. What matters now is that you're free from their drama. Don't let them drag you back into it. I managed a weak smile, reassured by his words. Talking with Dad reminded me that the past wasn't buried and forgotten. Elizabeth and Jack's unexpected visit was a harbinger of more turmoil to come. That night, sleep eluded me as I was haunted by memories of Elizabeth's manipulations, how she always appeared more favorable in our parents' eyes, how she had effortlessly charmed Jack away from me. Her return signaled nothing but trouble, stirring a growing sense of dread within me. Yet, amid the turmoil swirling in my mind, a new resolve began to take root. I wouldn't be a victim again. I was ready to confront Elizabeth and Jack, whatever they were planning. In the days following their visit, their mocking words and smirks replayed in my mind relentlessly. I threw myself into my work, hoping to find a distraction, but the past clung tightly, refusing to be ignored. Remembering my marriage to Jack, which had once seemed filled with love, now felt like navigating a field of thorns. It had started beautifully. Jack was charming, attentive, everything I thought I wanted. We were happy, or so I believed. But then things started to change. His late nights, his excuses, his avoidance of my questions. I had placed my trust in him, brushing aside the doubts and uneasy feelings that occasionally nagged at me. Then, one ordinary day, everything came into stark clarity. I returned home early from a business trip, eager to surprise Jack, but the surprise was on me. I walked into our living room to find Jack and Elizabeth together, laughing comfortably as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It was a moment that fractured my reality. The confrontation that followed was a whirlwind of tears, accusations, and agonizing revelations. Elizabeth was dismissive, her indifference to my anguish clear. You were always too buried in your work, Linda. Jack needed someone, and I was there. It's not our fault he lost interest in you. Jack's words were equally callous. I thought I loved you, Linda. But Elizabeth, she's different, more thrilling. We were never truly suited for each other. Their betrayal sliced through me, leaving deep scars on my heart and trust. The divorce that ensued was rapid, with Jack and Elizabeth openly parading their newfound relationship, leaving me to pick up the fragments of my shattered life, feeling foolish and deeply wronged. Now, sitting in my office, memories of their duplicity ignited a fierce anger within me. How dare they re-enter my life after their deceit? How dare they disrupt my regained peace? But it wasn't just anger simmering inside me. It was a vehement craving for justice. I yearned for them to experience even a sliver of the agony they had inflicted. Revenge, once a repugnant thought, now seemed like the only avenue to final closure. Resolved, I decided to confront them, to demand explanations. This time, however, I would not stand before them as the heartbroken wife. I would be formidable and resolute. They had underestimated me once. They would not have the chance to do so again. I dialed Jack's number, my voice steady and my determination unwavering. "Jack, we need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on 5th Street tomorrow at noon." His response, a surprised stutter, was a minor yet satisfying triumph. "Sure, Linda, tomorrow," he replied just before the call ended. For the first time in days, I felt a surge of control. The game had indeed begun. This time, I was in it to win. The next day, the cafe was alive with the hum of morning chatter. I spotted Jack at a corner table, his body language tense. The smile he attempted faltered before it could fully form. "Linda, thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," he admitted, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I don't," I responded bluntly, sliding into the seat across from him. "But I need answers. Why are you and Elizabeth suddenly back in my life?" Jack shifted uncomfortably, his discomfort palpable. "Things haven't been great for us, Linda. After we left, we faced some tough times." Observing his unease brought a twisted sense of satisfaction. "Tough times? You're seeking sympathy from me?" I challenged, my tone sharp. "No, of course not," he stammered quickly. "It's just that Elizabeth is pregnant. We thought it's time to mend fences, for the sake of family." His words struck a chord and a brief twinge of hurt flashed through me, but skepticism quickly overtook it. "And you expect me to do what? Forgive you just like that?" I asked, my disbelief coloring every word. "It's not just about forgiveness, Linda," Jack said, his eyes darting away from mine. "There's also the matter of your father's estate." So that was it, the real reason behind their sudden reappearance. It wasn't about remorse or seeking reconciliation, it was purely out of greed. "You have some nerve, Jack. You cheat, you leave, and now you come back for money?" My voice rose, echoing slightly in the bustling cafe. "People can change, Linda. We've been through a lot. We just want a chance to start over, to be a family," he pleaded. "A family built on lies and deceit?" I shot back, my heart pounding with righteous anger. Just then, my phone vibrated with a new message. It was Elizabeth. "We need to talk. Alone. My place. Tonight." I glanced at Jack, my decision firm. "Tell Elizabeth I'll see her tonight," I said coolly, standing up to leave. The game was set, and I was ready to face whatever came next. "Jack, this isn't a simple family gathering. It's about settling scores," I declared, seeing the surprise flash across his face as I rose from my seat. A rush of empowerment swept through me. For far too long, I'd played the victim in their games, but now the tides were turning. I left Jack behind in the cafe, my heart pounding with a cocktail of anger, betrayal, and a newfound resolve. As I drove home, my mind was ablaze with strategies for the evening's confrontation with Elizabeth. I was determined to not let her deceit sway me again. By the time evening arrived, I stood in front of my mirror, ready to confront my past. The woman looking back at me was transformed, no longer overshadowed by Jack or Elizabeth's manipulations. Tonight, I was prepared to reclaim my life. Elizabeth's residence starkly contrasted with my own, ostentatious and flamboyant, mirroring her superficial values. When she opened the door, her arrogance was palpable. "Linda, come in. I'm glad you could make it," she said, her voice dripping with patronization as if her invitation was a favor. "Why am I here, Elizabeth? What do you want from me?" I asked, cutting straight to the point as she led me into her lavishly decorated living room. "I wanted to talk sister to sister," It's been too long, and with the baby on the way, I thought it's time we buried the hatchet, Elizabeth proposed, her audacity almost making me laugh. Bury the hatchet? After you stole my husband and now you're eyeing my father's inheritance? Elizabeth's face stiffened for a moment before she regained her composure. Linda, let's be practical. Jack and I need financial stability for our child. Your father's estate can help with that, she explained, her greed thinly veiled. You expect me to just hand over what's rightfully mine after everything you've done? I countered. It's not just about the money, Linda, Elizabeth insisted, feigning sincerity. We're still sisters, after all. Her words stunned me. You lost the right to call me sister when you betrayed me. A tense silence fell between us, and then Elizabeth's facade momentarily slipped, revealing her true intentions. Fine, if you're going to be selfish, let's talk legalities. Dads will favor the first grandchild. My baby will secure the inheritance for Jack and me, she stated bluntly. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. This was her strategy all along, using her pregnancy to manipulate our father's will in her favor. You're unbelievable, Elizabeth. You think you can manipulate everyone to get what you want, not this time, I said firmly, ready to challenge her every step of the way. I won't let you, I said with unwavering firmness. Elizabeth smirked, her eyes sharp and calculating. We'll see, Linda. Let's see how long you can keep up this act, she taunted with a sneer. As I turned and walked away, my thoughts were racing. Driving home, a plan began to take shape. Elizabeth and Jack were deeply engaged in a perilous game, but I had finally caught on to their tactics. It was high time they understood I was no mere pawn in their convoluted schemes. In the days that followed my clash with Elizabeth, I immersed myself in intense preparations for the impending legal showdown over my father's estate. I sought legal counsel, adamant about defending what was rightfully mine and preserving my father's legacy from Elizabeth and Jack's insatiable greed. As I pored over the legal intricacies, startling news reached me. Jack's business, once a pillar of confidence, had crumbled under financial strain. They were swamped in debt, and their opulent lifestyle was no longer sustainable. This revelation illuminated their desperate return and their frantic scramble for the inheritance. During a meeting with my lawyer, Miss Brenda, we reviewed our strategy. They are financially and legally cornered, she observed, scrutinizing the documents. Your sister's claim about the will doesn't stand up legally. We have a strong case to challenge it. Miss Brenda's confidence was reassuring, yet I was aware that Elizabeth and Jack wouldn't back down easily. They were like cornered animals, unpredictable and potentially dangerous. My resolve faced an unexpected test one evening when I returned from work to find Elizabeth waiting at my doorstep, her face a mask of defiance and desperation. Linda, we need to talk, she said, her voice quivering. I have nothing to discuss with you, Elizabeth. This matter is now with the lawyers, I responded, attempting to bypass her. She stepped forward, blocking my way. Please, Linda, listen. I'm not pregnant. It was all a lie. A scheme Jack and I concocted to manipulate Dad's will, she confessed. Though her revelation did not take me by surprise, it was just another layer of deceit in their extensive playbook. So you've been lying all this time? What now, Elizabeth? Ready to concede? I asked coldly as tears began to fill Elizabeth's eyes, revealing the depth of her turmoil. Despite everything, her plea for help didn't sway me. I don't know what to do, Linda. Jack's business is ruined. We're losing everything. I need your help, Elizabeth said, her voice desperate. The irony of her asking for my assistance after all the betrayal was almost comical. You want my help after everything you've done? You're delusional, I retorted, stepping back from her. The sister I once knew was long gone, replaced by a stranger the moment she chose betrayal over blood. Live with your choices, Elizabeth, I said firmly, leaving her standing alone as I went inside my house and shut the door on her and our shared past. It felt incredibly freeing to close the door on our toxic relationship. That night, as I sat in the silence of my living room, I understood that this struggle was about more than just an inheritance. It was about my liberation. It marked the end of Elizabeth and Jack's deceit and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. The following weeks were consumed by a flurry of legal proceedings. Elizabeth and Jack's desperation escalated as their financial woes deepened. Yet, with Miss Brenda's guidance and my newfound determination, I remained unshaken. The day of the court hearing was tense, the cold courtroom air contrasting sharply with the heat of simmering emotions. Jack and Elizabeth sat together, a facade of unity barely masking their true turmoil. As the hearing unfolded, Miss Brenda expertly countered each of their claims. Elizabeth's lie about her pregnancy came to light, further eroding their case. Watching Elizabeth, I saw the toll of her actions reflected in her face. The confident, manipulative sister I once knew had vanished, overwhelmed by the weight of her misdeeds. During a recess, Elizabeth approached me, desperation coloring her plea. "Linda, please, I know I don't deserve your mercy, but we're ruined. We have nothing," she implored. Her once persuasive words now fell flat. "You brought this on yourselves, Elizabeth. You chose greed and deceit, and now you must face the consequences," I responded calmly. The judge's final verdict was a clear victory for me, affirming that the inheritance would rightfully remain mine. Elizabeth and Jack left the courtroom defeated, their schemes dismantled. As I walked out, a profound sense of closure enveloped me. This was not merely a legal win, it was a personal triumph over the ghosts of my past. Elizabeth and Jack's downfall served as the justice they deserved, but for me it signaled a new beginning, free from the anguish they had caused. In the days that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, stepping out of the shadows cast by Elizabeth and Jack. The scars they left would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. I had grown stronger, more resilient, and gained a deeper understanding of myself and my values. One evening, as I sat in my garden watching the sun dip below the horizon, a profound realization washed over me. True victory doesn't come from seeking revenge or delighting in the misfortunes of those who have harmed us. Instead, it's found in the tranquility and resilience that blossom within us, the ability to let go of the past and step into fresh starts with open arms. The passing of my father-in-law was already a difficult reality to come to terms with, but what my husband Liam said next was utterly staggering. "Let's get divorced. Now that I've received the inheritance, I don't need you as my financial support anymore." For a moment, I was speechless. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Liam flashed a smug smile and said, "I just inherited about $3 million from my dad, so I don't need to rely on you financially." He then began to voice his frustrations about me. "Do you have any idea how much you've embarrassed me? I had high expectations because my dad arranged our marriage. I thought I'd be getting someone extraordinary, but instead, I got someone so ordinary." "And why did you agree to marry me then? You could have just said no," I countered. "It's obvious, isn't it? It was for the money. Who else would marry someone like you?" His words were cruel. I was stunned into silence for a moment, but I gathered my thoughts quickly. "Fine, here are the divorce papers." I agreed to the divorce, but kept something crucial from Liam, something I hoped he would deeply regret later. "My name is Teresa. I'm 39 years old, and I run a fashion company. I married Liam, who is 3 years my junior 3 years ago. Our marriage was arranged by his father, Mr. Willie, the CEO of a company I've collaborated with for many years. Liam, being an only child, was initially poised to succeed his father. However, he showed little interest and lacked the necessary skills, so he was soon out of the running for the position and settled into a regular job instead. What drew me to Liam initially was his easygoing nature. Growing up, people often told me I was too serious and lacked spontaneity. I was frequently praised for being diligent, but sometimes people considered me too rigid. Some of my ex-boyfriends even complained, "You're not fun, it's like I'm dating a boss." These comments were disheartening, but I always wondered if perhaps I was, indeed, too serious. Being labeled as inflexible was not uncommon for me. I struggled to take things lightly and often became too absorbed in details. To me, Liam seemed to belong to a completely different world. On our first date, he had suggested a restaurant, but when we arrived, it was closed. I would have been flustered by such an unexpected situation, but not Liam. "Let's just go to that diner over there," he said, effortlessly changing plans. For someone as structured as me, his adaptability was eye-opening. I thought that by being with him, I could also learn to be more flexible. That's why I decided to marry him. Many were skeptical about our marriage, some even suggesting I could do better. Even Mr. Willie, my father-in-law, didn't seem thrilled. "Are you sure you want to take on my son? It feels like I'm burdening you with him," he once said to me. Despite my initial belief in Liam's potential, doubts began to surface not long after our marriage. Shortly after our wedding, Liam unexpectedly quit his job, and he didn't bother to discuss it with anyone. He simply stopped showing up. When both I and Mr. Willie confronted him about his sudden decision, his response was unsettling. "Why do I need to work if Teresa's earning enough for both of us?" he stated nonchalantly. Both his father and I were so taken aback by his audacity that we were momentarily speechless. Why would he decide to depend entirely on my income? On our first date, a similar display of his carefree attitude had charmed me. He had suggested a restaurant, but upon finding it closed, he casually proposed we go to a nearby diner instead. While such a change in plans would have unsettled me, Liam's ease of adapting had seemed refreshing. I thought his flexibility might help me become less rigid, which influenced my decision to marry him. Many had reservations about our union, even suggesting I could find a better match. Mr. Willie, my father-in-law, seemed particularly concerned, asking me, "Are you sure you want to take this on? It feels like I'm burdening you with him." At the time, I felt that no one truly appreciated Liam's value. However, their warnings soon proved prescient. Liam's reluctance to work became a recurring issue. Despite numerous discussions, where even Mr. Willie tried to intervene, Liam's mindset remained unchanged. "Even if I work, I can't earn as much as Teresa does," he would argue. Shortly after we married, he brazenly embraced the role of a freeloader. I considered divorcing him then. Such behavior might have been endearing from a young man in his 20s, but coming from a man nearing 38, it was deeply problematic. Eventually, we reached a reluctant compromise that Liam would handle the household chores. It turned out that Liam's parents had divorced a few years earlier, and before their separation, Liam's mother had also struggled with similar issues. It seemed the pattern of avoidance and dependency might have been deeper rooted in Liam than I had initially realized. This revelation only added to the complexity of our situation, leaving me to ponder the true dynamics of our relationship and Liam's character. Liam often used his lack of domestic upbringing as an excuse for his inability to manage household tasks. "I never learned any of this from my mother. She couldn't do anything around the house," he would say. Despite these initial shortcomings, with consistent praise and guidance from me, Liam gradually got the hang of basic chores. However, he never became particularly adept at them. Still, he seemed quite satisfied with his progress, often remarking with a hint of pride, "Thanks to me taking care of the house, Teresa can focus on work. You should be grateful." His confidence, though slightly irksome, wasn't something I wanted to challenge frequently. "Yes, Liam, I appreciate your help," I'd respond, mustering a smile. Though there were times his attitude annoyed me, we generally coexisted quite harmoniously. About a year into our marriage, a significant event unfolded. My father-in-law, who was not known for impulsive decisions, adopted an 8-year-old boy named Brian. Brian appeared to be an ordinary boy, but knowing my father-in-law, there had to be a compelling reason behind his action. One day, I asked him about it in private. He made me promise to keep the conversation confidential before revealing that Brian was the son of a close employee who had died tragically in an accident along with his wife. They had eloped, and with no close relatives to care for Brian, he would have been placed in foster care. Understanding his decision, I responded, "That's very kind of you." Although Liam and I didn't have children and enjoyed considerable freedom, I reassured my father-in-law of my support. "Please rely on me if you need anything." He smiled warmly, grateful for my offer. As promised, he did turn to me for help occasionally, especially on nights when he was unable to return home due to work or other commitments. I took care of Brian during these times. Initially, Brian was a bit reserved, but he soon began to feel comfortable around me. Observing his efforts to adapt and fit in was touching. Liam, however, did not share my feelings. He seemed displeased with Brian's presence in our lives, which was understandable to some extent, given his complex feelings about his father bringing another child into our home. Liam's reluctance to embrace Brian made me consider the deeper layers of his discontent and the dynamics within our family. When I attempted to discuss Brian's adoption with Liam, his reaction was disheartening. "Adopting him? What is Dad thinking? This is going to cut into my inheritance. I was hoping to get everything," he complained. It became clear that Liam wasn't conflicted about Brian as a person. He was merely worried about the financial implications. "I'm going to talk to Dad about this. I'm not cool with it," he declared one day before confronting his father. Upon his return, Liam was surprisingly cheerful. I approached him cautiously, asking, "How did it go?" "It's all good. My share isn't changing," he replied with a smile. "What do you mean?" I asked, puzzled. Liam explained with a sense of pride, "Dad's making Brian give up his rights to the inheritance because I'm his real son." I was taken aback. Could my father-in-law, who had spoken so kindly of Brian, really plan to exclude him? It seemed out of character, and something felt off, but Liam was too pleased with the outcome to notice my concern. "Well, if my father-in-law says so, there must be a reason. Anyway, he's still young. We won't have to deal with his inheritance for a long time. Maybe I'll divorce Liam before then, who knows?" I thought to myself half-jokingly. However, life took an unexpected turn. A year later, my father-in-law had a serious accident and passed away. Losing him so suddenly was shocking. I had known him longer than I had known Liam, and he had always been a principled man, both in his professional life and at home. Overwhelmed with grief, I prepared for the funeral while struggling with my profound sense of loss. Liam, on the other hand, appeared oddly detached from the situation. Perhaps the suddenness of his father's death left him in disbelief. During the funeral, I took the lead in organizing the proceedings since Liam seemed distant and uninvolved. I tried my best to hold back tears, but the sight of young Brian crying broke my heart. Liam, in contrast, didn't shed a single tear. Instead of showing sadness, he looked restless and, oddly enough, almost pleased, which I found disturbing. His lack of emotion and strange demeanor during such a painful time made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about the man I had married. I confronted Liam, feeling something was off with his demeanor. "Aren't you sad about your dad?" I asked, hoping to understand his apparent lack of sorrow. His response caught me off guard. "Oh, I'm definitely sad, but, I'm also kind of excited. Oops, I guess I let that slip, huh?" He chuckled lightly. "Come on, Teresa. Dad was the CEO, right? He must have left a lot of money. How much do you think he left behind?" It was then I realized that Liam hadn't been lost in thought. From before the funeral until now, he hadn't shown any genuine grief for his father. Instead, He was smiling at the thought of the inheritance he expected to receive. "What's gotten into you?" I exclaimed, unable to hide my shock. "Well, think about it. We're divorced, my mom isn't getting any of it, and Brian, being adopted, won't get any inheritance, so it's all mine. You think I can't be happy about that?" Liam's smirk widened, his expression nearing laughter. Seeing him like that, so utterly pleased at the prospect of his gain following his father's death, was disturbing. "Say whatever you want," I said, feeling an urge to walk away. But before I could leave, there was one more thing I needed to address: Brian's situation. With my father-in-law gone, I wanted to ensure Brian had a stable home. "Liam, I've asked to let Brian stay with us for a while. If not, he might end up in foster care. I want to raise him myself. Are you okay with taking him in?" Liam surprisingly agreed with a smile. "Sure, Teresa. What you do has nothing to do with me anymore." Then he handed me a piece of paper. It was green, a divorce paper. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "Let's get a divorce now. Now that I got the inheritance, I don't need my ATM anymore," Liam said coldly. For a moment, I couldn't grasp the full extent of his words. Had he just referred to me as an ATM, implying I was no longer needed? "What do you mean?" I pressed for clarity. Liam smirked again, probably enjoying the moment. "I got around $3 million from my dad's inheritance, so I don't need you anymore. With this much, I don't have to work. I don't have to please you," he explained, revealing the depths of his self-interest and lack of empathy. Liam's behavior left me stunned. The inheritance, a result of my father-in-law's passing, seemed to trigger an unsettling change in him. He behaved as if he had won a large lottery, not showing any sign of grief. Instead, he was practically jubilant, a reaction that painfully underscored how money can profoundly alter someone's actions. Perhaps, I thought, Liam was simply overwhelmed by the sudden windfall. "Calm down, Liam. Let's talk about this," I urged, placing my hand on his shoulder in an attempt to ground him. Liam shrugged off my hand with a jolt and snapped at me furiously. "Shut up, you boring woman! I only married you because my dad set us up and you were a CEO, but I've always felt suffocated with you." He continued to air his grievances, recounting how disappointed he was to end up with someone he deemed as mundane as me after our arranged meeting. "If that's how you felt, you could have just said no to the marriage. I never forced you," I retorted, refusing to be portrayed as the villain. "It's obvious, isn't it? For the money. Who else would marry someone like you?" Liam jeered, openly admitting that his motivations were purely financial. His mockery was a painful echo of his true sentiments. Liam, unabashedly, began to reveal more shocking truths. I had a significant debt. My dad said if I changed my ways and devoted myself to you, he would pay it off. So, of course, I married you. His words confirmed that his love was never genuine. It was all a financial arrangement. Seeing Liam laugh so cruelly, I realized that I no longer recognized the man I had married. With a resolute mind, I decided to forego the advice I had initially planned to give him and started filling out the divorce papers without hesitation. Liam, who had been advocating for a divorce, seemed somewhat surprised to see my decisiveness. "Hey, are you thinking of getting a divorce now?" "Fine, here's the divorce papers," I declared, feeling a sense of liberation as I wrote them. "Now we're total strangers. Whatever happens from now on doesn't concern the other. You can live with that kid and I can hang out with younger women. We're free," Liam said, his tone showing he was ecstatic about the situation. From what I could tell, he hadn't been unfaithful during our marriage, which was one of the few surprises left in our relationship. I never suspected it, but now none of it mattered anymore. Seeing Liam so thrilled about the divorce, I couldn't help but remark, "Interesting, Liam. If you were this happy about it, you should have asked for a divorce sooner." "I had my reasons. I wanted the money," Liam replied nonchalantly, stuffing the divorce papers into his bag before hastily leaving our shared home. The house suddenly felt too large and empty, a reminder of the life I once shared with Liam. It was time for a change. With Brian now in my life, I thought it would be best to start fresh somewhere new. Selling the house and moving closer to my parents seemed like a sensible decision, especially to provide Brian with a stable and supportive environment. Although it meant he would have to change schools, Brian was agreeable to the idea. "It's a bit sad, but now we can look for a new place without any reservations," he said. Finding the right place took some time, but eventually I made a decision. Proximity to my parents and a great location were my top priorities. The house we found was expensive, but it was worth it considering Brian's needs and the benefits of the location. When Brian and I visited the property, his eyes lit up at the sight of the spacious and beautifully decorated house, complete with a swimming pool. While I hadn't planned on a pool, Brian's excitement made it all worthwhile. "Wow, this is amazing!" Brian exclaimed. His happiness was what mattered most to me, and so we moved in. Settling into our new home took some time, but it gradually became a comforting sanctuary for both of us. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from Liam. He sounded desperate and wanted to meet to apologize. Curious about his sudden change of heart, I agreed to meet him. I left Brian with my mom and went to the diner where Liam was waiting. He looked pale and distraught as I approached. "Teresa!" he called out, standing up. I gave him a cold look. "What do you want, Liam? We're supposed to be strangers now." "Don't say that. The truth is, my dad had debts. Damn, I never thought—" "Wait, didn't you get $3 million from your inheritance? Just use that to pay off your debts," I interrupted. "No, the debts are more than what I inherited," Liam explained, revealing that he had inherited more financial trouble than assets. Liam looked defeated. "Teresa, you must have some savings. We used to be married. Please help me," he begged, trying to muster a charming smile. But did Liam forget how he had treated me? After all the times he made me feel insignificant, even calling me an ATM, why would I want to help him now? "You regretted marrying me, huh? After everything you said, now you want help? Well, back then, I never thought I'd be in this situation." Liam tried to justify his sudden need for help. "Sorry, I can't help you. I don't have the money," I stated firmly. "What do you mean? I heard your business is doing great," Liam argued, not ready to let go. "That's not true. I wish you'd stop blaming me for your mistakes. I'm not lying. I just don't have money to lend. Not every bank lends to everyone, right? Why would I lend if I don't expect it back?" Liam looked guilty for a moment, perhaps remembering his harsh treatment of me. Liam's lack of an apology didn't surprise me. His pride was too deep-seated. "Why are you being so cold? Do you still care about me?" he pressed, seemingly forgetting his earlier harshness. "Oh, did you forget what you said when we divorced? We're strangers now, nothing to do with each other. Weren't those your words?" His attempt to play the victim baffled me. I might have said that, but I didn't mean it. I never thought things would end up like this, Liam confessed, a hint of sadness in his voice as he leaned on the table. He then mentioned something about life insurance, but his father's lawyer had told him he wasn't the beneficiary. "Oh, really?" I chuckled, which seemed to catch Liam off guard. "You don't think Teresa would be the one your dad left it to, do you?" "No, it's not me." "Then why did you laugh?" "I just felt a bit sorry for you, that's all. If it was insurance, I wouldn't have inherited the debts." "Exactly. That's why my father-in-law had Brian give up the inheritance. He left something for Brian through life insurance. Brian was the beneficiary of my father-in-law's life insurance," I explained, clearing up his misunderstanding. "Is that all you wanted to talk about? If so, I'm leaving. There's nothing I can do for you," I stated firmly, standing up to leave. "Wait, can't we start over? I was just upset about my dad back then, but I truly care about you, Teresa," Liam pleaded. "You mean you only see me as a dollar sign, right?" I knew Liam was trying to deny it, but I wasn't fooled. After all, I don't have a single dime to give to someone like you. Well, someone important is waiting for me at home. With that, I left the diner. hearing Liam's cries fade behind me, but they didn't affect me. I hurried home, wondering if Brian might be hungry or if he had received something from his grandma. I quickly headed to the subway station. As for Liam, I heard he's working multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts. With no work experience, qualifications, or motivation, he couldn't secure a full-time job anywhere. I once saw him at a convenience store while on my way to a client meeting. He looked much older and thinner, a shadow of his former self. Liam, who had always relied on others, was now facing the consequences. There's no sympathy left in me for him. On the other hand, I'm living peacefully with Brian. We even argue sometimes, which is saddening when Brian ignores me after a fight, but I try to see it as a sign that he's opening up. I plan to support him until he can stand on his own 2 feet, fulfilling what I believe would have been my father-in-law's wish. This has become my goal in life now. Tonight, I plan to unwind at a play, but my mother-in-law had other ideas. She arrived unexpectedly with 9 friends in tow, assuming they could all stay at my house while I was out. Despite my previous plans, she insisted they leave their belongings at my place and asked if I could prepare dinner and sleeping arrangements for them as if my night was theirs to plan. Caught off guard by her audacity and the necklace she wore, an item I cherished, my frustration boiled over. I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm actually about to leave for a trip," I informed her, a statement that took her by surprise. It was the breaking point after enduring her relentless demands. "Please return that necklace," I finally asserted, demanding the respect and boundaries long overdue. "My name is Julie, a 32-year-old who transitioned from an administrative role to teaching computer classes after marriage. My husband, Eric, runs his father's company and often appears preoccupied with its challenges. Our moments of respite, like our cherished movie dates, bring him visible relief, a sight that warms my heart. Although I've always been more of a listener than a speaker. With Eric's encouragement, I'm learning to voice my thoughts more confidently. My older brother has always been protective, and while I once found that stifling, I now see it as a form of support, much like what Eric provides. Eric's brother, who serves as vice president of their father's company, and his wife, Catherine, who is about my age, are also a part of our intertwined lives. Catherine, Eric's sister-in-law, has always been a person I admire. She's ambitious, dependable, and kind-hearted. What truly stands out is her assertiveness and the way she confidently expresses her views. She also possesses a remarkable ability to be understanding and adaptable. Witnessing her stand up to our mother-in-law was nothing short of impressive. Unfortunately, Catherine and her husband live quite far away, which means we don't see each other as often as I'd like, something I often find myself regretting. On the flip side, our mother-in-law carries herself as if she owns the company, being the president's wife. She's always brimming with confidence, but her stubbornness and arrogance are unmistakable. She often pressures me, insisting, "Julie, you're Eric's wife, the president. You should quit your job as a computer instructor and fully support your husband." While Eric stands by my choices, her dissatisfaction is palpable, and I'm thankful we don't live too close to her. I've always hoped for a simple, peaceful life with Eric, perhaps with children in the future. However, everything took a sudden turn when Eric's father passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. It was a shock to us all, and it left Eric and his brother to figure out the next steps for the family business. During this turbulent time, Eric decided to relocate to Philadelphia to work at the company's main office, and his brother stepped up as the new president, with Eric as vice president. We found a cozy house in Philadelphia, slightly removed from the hustle and bustle and a bit far from the nearest train station, but in a peaceful, safe area bathed in sunlight. It promised a comfortable life. With all the changes at work, Eric often returned home late, so I took it upon myself to ensure our home was a warm, welcoming place. I prepared healthy meals to support him through these trying times. As the weeks rolled into a month, Eric's appreciation for my efforts was evident. "I'm back. I'm starving," he'd announce, and I'd respond with a smile, "Thanks for working so hard. I'll make dinner." One day he mentioned, "Hey, Julie, my mom wants to visit this weekend. Is that okay?" Considering she might be feeling lonely since the passing of Eric's father, I was more than willing to welcome her. "Of course," I replied, although aware that we still had some tidying up to do. "She's welcome," I assured Eric, and he quickly said he'd let his mom know. He then suggested inviting his brother and Catherine too, to which I happily agreed. It might sound odd, but relocating here meant I could see Catherine more often, which turned out to be a delightful surprise. That weekend, we gathered to catch up and reminisce about my father-in-law. It was bittersweet. "Sadly, Dad's gone, but I didn't want to stay sad forever," my mother-in-law shared, revealing a new hobby she'd picked up. She looked effortlessly elegant as usual, today accented by a stylish light purple scarf, and although she seemed a bit thinner, her presence remained commanding, especially when advising Eric and his brother on business matters. Since the passing of my father-in-law, I noticed she became more exacting with me. "Julie, we're running out of drinks. Could you go buy some?" She directed towards me, but then Catherine offered to go. "Oh, could you? That would be helpful," she responded to Catherine, her tone noticeably softer than how she spoke to me. I suspected she was perhaps struggling with her grief, so I chose to overlook her sharp comments for the time being. After dinner, Eric kindly drove everyone home, marking the end of the night. However, this was just the beginning of more frequent visits from my mother-in-law, who soon began critiquing how I maintained the house, voiced complaints about Catherine, and even started rummaging through our fridge uninvited. "Julie, Eric is so busy right now. You should watch the meals you prepare for him. What if he gets sick too?" she cautioned me one day, followed by a remark about some leftover trash. "Can't you clean up properly?" Her criticisms seemed endless, a way to pass the time, but they were always directed at me, never at Catherine, who she'd quickly dismiss, claiming other engagements. It wasn't that she disliked me, but perhaps she found it easier to boss around someone who seldom argued back, unlike Catherine, who always stood her ground. This environment made me consider getting a job, just to spend less time at home. Despite securing a job, the situation at home with my mother-in-law only intensified. "Julie, we're out of teriyaki sauce, so pick some up while you're out," she'd command, even as she brought leftovers to take back with her. Her entitlement often left me speechless, especially knowing she could easily afford such things herself. Then, one day, a deeply cherished necklace, a keepsake from my mother, vanished from where I always kept it safe. My immediate suspicion fell on my mother-in-law, who was frequently at our house and seemed too familiar with where things were kept. After a fruitless search, I reluctantly confronted her, only to be met with fierce anger. "You probably lost it yourself. How dare you accuse me? What kind of person are you?" she shouted. I tried to explain. "It's a special keepsake from my mother, and it means a lot to me," but her response only deepened the wound. "I don't care. It's just a necklace. Why don't you just ask Eric to buy you a new one?" Realizing she couldn't grasp the sentimental value of the necklace, I decided to drop the subject. But then, more things began to disappear, money from my wallet and items around the house. Even as I kept a wary eye on her, I never caught her in the act. Exhausted and confused, I confided in Catherine, who agreed that my mother-in-law was the likely culprit, given no one else had such access to our home. It saddened me to think it, but without concrete evidence, I was at a loss. Catherine saw how troubled I was and suggested a getaway. "You need a break, Julie. Why not join me on a short vacation?" she proposed. The idea of stepping away from it all was appealing. I felt drained, and the thought of a little escape was rejuvenating. So, 3 weeks later, as Eric and his brother prepared for a business trip to meet with a company in another state, Catherine and I planned our departure. "I'm heading out, Julie. Just relax and enjoy your time," Catherine encouraged as we got ready. "Take care," I replied, grateful for the chance to recharge and hopeful that a little distance might offer some perspective on the chaotic happenings at home. I packed early, eager for the respite that awaited. I had my travel bag ready by the door, eager for the upcoming trip with Catherine. Just as I was about to leave, the doorbell rang. Curious, I checked the video feed and saw my mother-in-law at the door, not alone but with a group of friends in tow. "Hi, Julie, I brought some friends. Can you let us in?" She greeted me as if it were a normal visit. Opening the door, I found her and about 9 friends, all laden with heavy bags. Were they planning to stay over? "We're staying over tonight. Make us feel comfortable," she announced as if it was a done deal. "Didn't I mention it? We're going to see a play nearby tonight, and since it ends late, we decided to stay here," she added casually. This was completely unexpected, especially since I was about to leave for my plans. "Oh, did I inconvenience you? Kayla told me you were okay with it," she said, trying to justify her imposition. I was taken aback by her audacity. "I'm sorry, but I wasn't informed about this and I already have plans," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. She seemed surprised but quickly retorted, "But you'll be back soon, right? We'll just drop our bags and go out for a while. Can you make dinner and set up beds for us?" Ignoring my stated plans, she acted as if everything was already settled. "I can't. I'm going on a trip with Catherine. Oh, just for Catherine, you can go any time. We've come all this way just for today. How long are you going to make us wait?" she persisted, completely disregarding my needs. Then something caught my eye, a glint of metal around her neck. It was the necklace, a cherished memento from my mother. "Wait, that necklace you're wearing," I started, my voice trailing off in shock. To my astonishment, it was indeed the same necklace. "Kayla, where did you get that necklace?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. "Why, it's just one of my collections. Is there a problem?" she replied smugly, clearly enjoying the control she felt she had. "That can't be right. That necklace is rare and a limited edition," I countered, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. Just then, Catherine arrived, puzzled as to why I hadn't met her as planned. "I was wondering why you didn't show up at our meeting place and didn't contact me. So this is what was happening," she said upon entering. "I'm sorry I couldn't get in touch," I replied, the stress evident in my voice. Noticing my distress, Catherine quickly tuned into the tension. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes darting between me and the necklace. I was upset and blurted out, "The necklace she's wearing is the same one that belonged to my mother, which recently went missing. The one I kept in that special box," I explained, barely holding back tears. Catherine, realizing the gravity of the situation, spoke up loudly enough for everyone to hear, reinforcing the significance of the necklace and its sudden mysterious appearance around my mother-in-law's neck. In a hushed voice, desperate to keep the matter from her friends, my mother-in-law whispered, "Can you two stop this? It's embarrassing. Do you want to accuse me of theft?" Her face flushed with indignation. "Yes, I find it suspicious," Catherine replied with conviction, not backing down. "Do you have any proof that I stole it? It's embarrassing to have such unreasonable daughters-in-law." "Please don't make a scene in front of my friends," she countered before turning back to her group with a forced smile. "Well, let's go inside, everyone." As she attempted to usher her friends inside, a crucial detail flashed in my mind. "Kayla, can I have a look at the necklace, please?" I asked, needing to confirm my suspicion. Catherine circled behind her to get a closer look. "Enough of this. What's your mother's name?" she snapped, trying to dismiss us. "It's Amanda. There it was. I spotted the engraving." "The initials A are right here," I pointed out. Her friends, upon seeing the engraving, looked horrified and began to distance themselves. "Stop this! I didn't come here for this. Let's go, everyone," my mother-in-law urged, her tone frantic. "We're not letting you leave," Catherine declared, her voice firm, blocking her path. The friends, sensing the growing tension, muttered, "We're not involved," and quickly made their way toward the subway. "There's been some mistake," my mother-in-law stammered, attempting to follow her friends, but she was stopped by an unexpected presence. "What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip?" Eric stood there. His arrival was unexpected. It turned out that his supposed business trip was scheduled for the next day. He had given his mother a false date to see how she would act, a plan devised after Catherine informed him of the missing items from our home. Visiting his childhood home and finding similar items missing, Eric had begun to suspect theft, but without concrete evidence, he knew any accusation could easily be denied. "What are you doing here?" Eric demanded. "I was just leaving," she replied, attempting to escape the situation. "Give it back. That necklace isn't yours. It's a keepsake from my parents." "Why do you have it, Ma?" I demanded. "It's not what you think. I found it in my purse. Julie must have set me up," she claimed, trying to shift the blame to me, panic evident in her voice. "Do you think such a lie would work? There's no way Julie would do something like that. First, give the necklace back to Julie. We'll talk after that," Eric insisted. Reluctantly, she removed the necklace, threw it on the ground, and tried to flee. "Hey, wait!" we called out, starting to chase her, but stopping shortly after. We didn't need to chase her. The truth had already caught up to her. I was bewildered as around 15 police officers stood before my mother-in-law. The scene was surreal, and I couldn't grasp what was unfolding. Then one officer explained, "We received a report from a local resident. They said someone was causing a disturbance here and was often seen entering this house when the owners were away. They asked us to come quickly." "What are you talking about? I'm the mother of the son living here," my mother-in-law retorted, clearly annoyed. "Wait, what do you mean she entered when we weren't home?" I questioned, my curiosity piqued. "I never did such a thing," I interjected, trying to clarify that her visits were always during our presence. The police then shared more. The informant saw her sneaking into your backyard, likely using a spare key to get inside. Indeed, we had a hidden spare key under a plant pot in the backyard. This revelation sent a chill down my spine and suddenly made sense of the missing items. Eric had suspected something and planned to observe her actions today, but this turn of events was beyond his expectations. "Mom, why were you coming into our house when we weren't home?" Eric demanded an answer. "It's all lies. Are you going to believe some unknown person's story over me?" she shot back. "But you did have my precious necklace, didn't you?" I pressed her further. "I told you I found it in my purse." My mother-in-law maintained her story. One officer intervened. "Let's talk about this at the station." "But I didn't do anything. Eric, say something," she pleaded. "Mom, stop this. I can't understand why you did this," Eric said, his tone firm. Hearing her son's words, my mother-in-law seemed momentarily defeated and collapsed to the ground. However, just when it appeared she had given up, she burst into a rage. "After your father passed away, I felt so lonely. Seeing her always so cheerful, I couldn't stand it. I wanted her to feel the pain I felt," she confessed, her emotions raw and turbulent. Eric was visibly shaken by her irrational justification. Feeling the need to address the situation directly, I stepped in front of an increasingly upset Eric. "Kayla, I understand where you're coming from. Perhaps I've been too dismissive of our interactions. However, stealing and causing distress is an entirely different matter. Did you want to upset me? Is that what you were aiming for?" "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped back. "Did finding joy in pushing someone to their limits with such twisted actions fill the void of your loneliness?" I asked, trying to understand the depth of her actions. "Shut up! What do you know about me?" she yelled, unwilling to confront the reality of her actions. She responded defensively, "If you're feeling low, you should just tell us. We can't read minds." I attempted to calm her with reason. "Don't mock me. Why would I confide in you, you useless daughter-in-law?" she retorted angrily. "Mom, Julie has a point," Eric chimed in. trying to mediate as the tension escalated. The police, observing the situation deteriorate, intervened and suggested relocating to the station. "Are you actually going to arrest me? I can't believe this," she protested vehemently. Despite her objections, based on multiple eyewitness reports of her unauthorized entry and suspicion of theft due to her possession of my belongings, the police decided to detain her. My mother-in-law was arrested on charges of unlawful entry and theft, continuing to assert her innocence, demanding legal representation, and refusing the meals provided. During a visit, her father expressed his disappointment and encouraged her to sincerely contemplate her actions. His stern reprimand prompted her to tearfully apologize, showing a rare submission to his authority, the only one she seemed unwilling to defy. He cautioned her that without genuine introspection, she should not expect a welcoming return home. Reluctantly, she seemed to acknowledge the gravity of her situation. Perhaps the loss of her husband had left my mother-in-law adrift, her flashy attire and jewelry serving as armor against her insecurities. I pondered if her disparate treatment towards me and my sister-in-law was merely a facade masking her vulnerabilities. Nonetheless, her unchecked desires and poor impulse control remained distinct issues. It was evident that her flawed judgments had led to this unfortunate situation. I was stunned by how quickly things had escalated, especially after discovering that my mother-in-law had been using a spare key to enter our home surreptitiously. The thought of someone intruding into our personal space uninvited was deeply unsettling. Fortunately, our vigilant neighbors across the street, particularly the wife who worked from home, had noticed her suspicious behavior and reported it. I am immensely thankful for their brave intervention, which has since allowed us to live more peacefully, ensuring our safety. We updated our home security by changing all the locks and stopped placing a spare key outside. Eric decided it was best to sever ties with his mother, insisting that she refrain from contacting us in the future. He even warned that legal measures would be taken if she attempted to reach out after her release. Following her release, she returned to her childhood home in the countryside and surprisingly adopted a simpler way of life, a stark contrast to her previously extravagant lifestyle. Under the watchful eye of her father, she began to contribute to household chores from dawn. I genuinely hope this change gives her a chance to contemplate her previous actions. In the meantime, my father moved in with us, primarily to safeguard against any unexpected visits from my mother-in-law. His presence is not only a security measure, but also a comfort to us during an exciting time. I am expecting our first child. The prospect of becoming grandparents has brought a new level of joy and support from Eric, enhancing the warmth and resolve in our household. While material things may offer momentary pleasure, it's truly the company of loved ones that enriches our lives. As we settle into our current living situation, surrounded by family, we are dedicated to maintaining the tranquility and joy in our daily lives, cherishing the serene and supportive environment we've cultivated.